goal setting, mental rehearsal, self-talk, and arousal control. So the thing about goal setting, guys, this guy Dan Pink, he talks about three things: autonomy, mastery, purpose. I just want to focus in on one thing. Who here could not run a marathon? Put your hand up if you couldn't run a marathon. Get it right up there. Let's see. So probably 3/4 of the room could not run a marathon. Okay, let's do a thought experiment. The person who's closest to you in the world is dying. They've got 24 hours, and that's it. They're dead. Nothing can save them apart from you. In order to save them, you have to run 21 kilometers and get some medicine that if you bring it back and inject it into them, it saves their life. If you don't get there and back, they die, period. Who could not run this marathon? Now that's interesting, isn't it? Nobody. What's the difference? Yep, sense of purpose, which gives you the motivation. Yep, purpose is fundamental. Now, these guys going through Navy SEALs training, they have a purpose. They want to become Special Forces. And so for me, it's about, for people who don't have that, is what is your purpose? What is your individual purpose on life? Because when we have purpose, that is when we do extraordinary things. In the military, when I was in the military, everybody knows the purpose of being in the military. With every mission, everybody connected to that mission knew the purpose of the mission. Everybody, right down to the chef in the galley, knew his role in that mission, why his role was very critical to the success of the mission. Yeah? So it's about having your role connected to a higher purpose. Yeah? And particularly with all of your team galvanized towards this higher purpose. And in organizations, that's about the vision statement. And I work with senior leadership teams, and I'm constantly shocked by how few people in senior leadership teams can tell me verbatim the vision of their organization. So thinking about that in terms of work, but also in a personal perspective, what's your purpose? Because if you have a purpose in life, that will drive you on to endure stress. It is a game changer in terms of stress. If you don't have purpose, you will not go anywhere near where you would go if you do have purpose. So worthwhile spending some time thinking about your purpose. And in a workplace, if you're head of a team, is about having a purpose of that team that sinks in with the purpose of the organization. That's pretty key. Okay, the other thing, guys, in terms of goal setting is what's called baby steps. When I was on survival course, it was interesting here these special forces guys talk. And when I was on survival course, I'm just going to make it through this NavX. Now I'm just going to make it through the night NavX. I'm just going to make it through this night. And when I was getting interrogated, it was I'm just going to make it through this stress position. I worked out it was about 20 minutes per stress position. That's my goal, through this stress position. Then when I was getting interrogated, I know this interrogation is going to stop at some stage. I'm just going to make it through this interrogation. It's about breaking that goal down into small, achievable chunks, particularly when there's higher stress, because the brain, when it's in a threat state, it starts to withdraw and it doesn't project forward. So you've got to have small, little baby step goals. Does that make sense? Particularly in higher stress. That's when the goals have got to be daily, half daily, those sorts of things. Because that's what gives you the motivation. Right, I've done that goal, that's great. Now I reset and I recalibrate. Make sense? Okay, the next bit is mental rehearsal. He's a reasonably sharp cookie. Does anybody know who this is? Albert Einstein, and he knew it. Imagination is everything. I work with a number of elite athletes. They all do mental imagery. You will not find a world-class athlete who does not do mental imagery. It is so successful. Now let me talk about it in real-world terms. 6 years ago, they did an experiment, a bunch of neuroscientists, where they got a bunch of people in who didn't play the piano, and they looked at an area of the brain. So your motor cortex is a strip that runs across the brain like that, and each part of your body, it has an association in that motor cortex. So we can actually know where the areas for finger flexor and extensors, the muscles that make you do that. And you can measure the size of it in the brain. So what they did is they measured this And then they got these guys to play the piano for an hour a day for 5 days. And they tracked whether there was any changes in the size of that area in the brain. Here's the paper, here's the study. Here's the guys who did the physical practice. And you can see that day 1, there's the size of those finger flexors and extensors in the top left. Day 5, look at that increase. This is absolute proof that the brain changes depending on what you feed it. Now, they had a control group down the bottom who did nothing. They had a third group who sat in a room when the other guys were playing the piano. They closed their eyes and they imagined playing the piano. They did not move a finger. There, in the middle, is their brain map over 5 days. Anybody notice any discernible difference between the size on day 5 of those two different brain maps? Not a lot. Tiny difference. Mental, rehearsal, works. Absolutely. And this is where tying it to affirmations. Affirmations about where you want to be, what you want to become, and to mentally rehearse that on a daily basis. And I recommend to people they write their affirmations on the bathroom mirror or somewhere where they're going to see it all the time. There's the reminder, then you mentally rehearse. Every time you mentally rehearse, you create connections in the brain. And when you've created those connections once and you rehearse it, you strengthen those connections so when you come to do it in real life, it's easier. Yeah? It's like riding a bike. Does that make sense? Very, very powerful stuff, guys. And the next bit is self-talk. So this is Daniel Goleman's work about how self-talk affects your self-image, and that controls your performance, and that stimulates further self-talk. You know what I mean by self-talk? You know, the stuff that just goes on. Now, neuroscientists reckon that we have between 70 and 90,000 thoughts a day. They reckon less than 1,000 of them are original. So what's all the stuff that is just on autoplay in each and every one of your brains that was set in there when you were a kid and that you reinforce and reinforce? Is it all positive and helping you to achieve your goals? Does anybody here have any negative thoughts? Is there any human beings in the room? What they found with the Special Forces guys is under pressure, they talk to themselves at a rate of 300 to 1,000 words a minute. It is verbal diarrhea. So what they did was got them to focus on changing that self-talk into a positive. You hear the guy who's talking about you see your friends, and your friends come up, they failed, and that's like, well, if he's failed, what's going to happen to me? Can I do it? You know, all this stuff that's under pressure, the brain starts to doubt. If the brain starts to doubt, you will likely fail. Yeah? I think it was Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So that self-talk is very powerful, and changing that self-talk into positive will influence your self-image. That will control your performance. If your performance is positive, that stimulates further positive self-talk. This can be either a positive loop or a negative loop. Yep. Okay. Last bit on this is about arousal control. So this is when we get stressed, is having some sort of control. I'm going to show you little breathing bars in a minute that the Special Forces use, that when Australia eventually beat the Kiwis in the rugby, not this time, the time before, when James O'Connor took that kick, he was in the paper the next day talking about doing this, taking this type of breathing. Now, Western science has just taken about 3,000 years to catch up with yogis and Eastern mystics who've known that the key to health is long, slow, deep breathing. What we've added in, just do this for me please, is that the breath in and the breath out are different rates. You'll notice that the breath in is longer than you normally do. You notice that the breath out is even longer than that. When you breathe like this for just a couple of minutes, you activate what's called the baroreflex. It is then physiologically impossible to be in a fight or flight state, because the parasympathetic part of the nervous system kicks in. So breathing at this rate when you're stressed is highly, highly useful. When I first started doing corporate talks, I'd get a little bit nervous, do this before, gone. It's really, really powerful. So if you've got a presentation to deliver, a meeting, if you need to get your brain focused, if you need to get to sleep at night, do that. This will induce alpha wave activity in the brain, and get you out of fight or flight. So it's pretty cool stuff.